Welcome everybody. Welcome to another topic. Today we're going to be talking about Revit phasing. As many of you guys know, if you ever dealt into Revit, you would probably have to understand how phasing work. So today's topic, what I'm going to be discussing, it's how to create different phase, how do you operate them to display them correctly, and finally, just understanding the object behavior and how to make it show up correctly. As you know, when you work in Revit, there's always going to be a default phasing filters. What this does is that it means you can show a bunch of stuff in different conditions. Now, most often people by default always put show all. You have to be careful because if you put it to show all and you have a lot of demolition, what it does is that it's going to start showing up on your drawing. So my recommendation for everybody is that if you ever work in any project, I always choose my filter 100% of the time, always show complete, because what that does is it basically makes the building existing and new and display it the way it's supposed to be, which is show the building in a complete phase without demolition. So just be careful, because I think a lot of the projects that I'm encountering is that everybody just puts show all. Now, this is fine if you are working on new projects without any demolition or previous phase, but if you have previous phase and you show demolition, do not use show all. Always use show complete. Okay. There's other one as well, very seldomly used, but I normally use it if it's only for QA and QC. There's one called show previous plus demo, show new only. All right. There's also show complete with the phase existing. Okay, so I always do that, and then always show previous. So just be careful, because sometimes what happens is that if you choose one of these filter, like let's say show all, show previous plus demo, and show previous, is that their materials won't show up properly. Okay, it's all controlled through this what's known as project phase filter. I'm probably gonna get more into it later on. All right, object behavior. Now, sometimes what tends to happen is that when you add an object, sometimes it will not display in a proper phase. Room objects in particular are susceptible to phasing. So if you place a room in, let's say, an existing condition, if you want to make it show up in a new phase, you have to re-put or input those doors into the new phase. So it's a double whammy, so it's a double work. So most often, what I typically do is that I usually put rooms in the new construction phase, and I never put it in existing, unless you're doing some sort of a retrofit that you need to show existing condition. But there's always going to be a workaround. I've seen a couple ways to work around this. So if you do run into this problem where you need to show rooms but you do not want to create multiple objects, come and see me. I'll explain to you another method you can use. Now, one thing Revit tends to do when it comes to phasing is that when you hit that demolition, right, they always patch a hole in that. Okay, in reality, when you're doing anything construction, that is not true. So you have to be careful, because if, let's say, I want to demolish this window, it's going to patch in a hole there, but in reality it's supposed to be a hole. Okay, so just be careful if you are doing construction and say, oh, this is demo, in a new phase it's going to just show a patch wall. You have to be very careful. Let's say, assuming that you want to put in a window into there, what happens is that if you put a new window, sometimes there's a 50-50 chance that it sometimes will work or sometimes will not work. Okay, I've run into issue with Centrum as well, so we're going to discuss that more in detail, how I managed to kind of work with this. All right, phasings as design option. Most of the time, if you never dealt with the design option can be iffy. Okay, you can use phasing as kind of like your design option. Now in this case, in Centrum, what happens is that we have a scenario where we show an extension which was not approved by our client, and then we have another client that was the tenant showcasing the truncated building. So both of us are working with two different clients and two different expectations. So what I did in this particular model is that I added one version is basically for the skin, and then the other one is basically showing, okay, this is the truncated version of it. Okay, so you can actually do that, and I'll show you kind of like how I do it in this. And yeah, let's get back to the tips and tricks and demo. Okay, let's go back. Hopefully this does not crash, because sometimes it can, not right now. Sometimes it can happen anytime. I apologize if anything crashes. So what happened is that if you want to start a phase, there's always a manage button, and there's one called the phase. If you click on it, you're noticing that there's different phase. Okay, you can go past to the future. Each one of them you can always put in whatever you want. Okay, but when you start a new project, it's always going to have existing and new. Okay, in between, if you want to add a in between kind of a phase, you can just put it in. Now, first thing I always do is that before existing, I always put in reference. Now, why would I do that? Okay, I'll show you the reason why I put reference in the beginning. So let's assume I'm going to go into the project itself. Now, if I want to switch to different phase, what I typically do is that right now my phase filter is show complete, but I want to change it to reference. Okay. You notice that there is a wall there with a bunch of doors. So when you're creating any, let's say, building kind of like all the doors, like schedule that you want to place in your project, I always put it in this phase. Okay. So what I did here is that I basically say show it in reference and demolish it in existing. So you basically, the technique is that you're using that for kind of like, you know, displaying your walls, the door schedule, basically, elevation. So you can do this for your plumbing fixtures. Let's say if you want to do like typical plumbing fixtures, your typical kind of like your windows, I always put it under reference and then say demolish it in new phase, so they don't get tracked or they don't get scheduled. Because if you set it to none, whenever you do a door schedule, it will start scheduling those. So just be careful. Okay, when you schedule stuff, it will only schedule one certain phase and it will not schedule for the different phase. Okay, so that's what reference is for. Now, life safety plan, it was created by the previous model. I'm just basically taking over. Now you notice that here I put in a tenant improvement. Okay, what tenant improvement does is that we have a DP world as our tenant client, and then we have CXP, which is kind of like their base building model client. So both of them have different expectation. So in this particular project, rather than separate them out as two different kind of entity, one has different types of base buildings and the other one has different types of base building, I just asked myself, why not just combine them together so that you can show one side to be one and then the other side to be the other. So here I'm just going to displaying, I'm just going to go with 3D mode. Okay, I'm in 3D mode. So here I'm just going to duplicate views. Okay, let's see, where's my view? Okay, let's say I'm going to say duplicate this view. I'm going to call this, I'm just going to leave this alone. I'm just going to duplicate this. Here I'm just going to call this 3D wood extension. And this one, another one without extension, 3D without extension. Okay, so in this particular view, what you can do is that 3D extension, you just set it to, let's say, new, and make sure you always set to complete. Okay, because if you choose the other one, let's say show all, let's say here, if you choose to show all, you notice that the material will turn to gray and it will not show the proper material. Because what happened is that anything that's existing, it's going to go grayed out. And then if you want to show a proper material, it just will not happen. So I always tell user, don't always put to show all. You can use show all if it's all new construction, one phase only. But if it's like you have different phase where you have existing and new, do not put show all. Always use show complete. Now I add another layer to this, is that those pink stuff, it's just a filter. I could turn them off just to making sure that the user understand what it does. So I'm just going to remove it. Okay, just remove those. There we go. And without extension, I'm just going to change this to tenant improvement. And here I'm just going to get rid of that filter. Just get rid of that. So what it does is that you can have two sets of different kind of like conditions. One is with extension, the other one without extension. Let me just double click on this and then just do WT. Like if you want to do like coordinations and just check out what is the difference between the two, it's set in there. Okay, so it's a very good way of kind of like organizing how you want to display different things. Now going back into this, I'm just going to go in here and change this phase. Oh, before I do that, let's go into the phase itself. Okay, we talk about this sort of things. There's also phase filter. Okay, this phase filter is kind of like user can add it in if they want. Most often I tell user don't modify this. Okay, because what happens that the more you modify, the more it's going to get convoluted and you may not understand what it does. So what it does is that it has this 4 phases. You cannot add anything new to this. Okay, it's always going to be the same: new, existing, demolish, and temporarily. You can put a new, new filter. If it's not there, let's say for example this one, say do not, just say do not show. Then here what you can do here is that you can say, okay, do not display, do not display, do not display, and do not display. So by doing that, it means that all my model do not show anything. Okay, that's another way to create, like if you want certain things to create, do not display, override, or by category. By category, what it does is that it's going to use whatever is in your model, okay, whatever is in your VV. It's going to use this guy right here. So whatever is in here, it's going to use that override. If you want to say overwritten, what it does is that it's going to overwritten using this graphics override right here. Okay, so if you say you want a phase to be overwritten for all of it, it means that it's going to use this particular overrides. Okay. Do not display just basically just shut it off. So you could create a bunch of them, but I would say just leave the default by alone. Sometimes you're not going to see, let's say, show complete. If you create a new one, it doesn't have one. You can create one. The only thing you need to change is by categories to existing and new, and demolish temporary, just turn it off. Okay, don't show it. Graphic override, what you can do is that if you want to show like what's been demolished, I could go in here, let's say for example, in this particular one, I want to show this in bright pink, and you want to show, like, let's say this is my solid fill, and then hit apply. Okay, right now it will not show anything until I say change the filter. Okay, right now I'm just basically adding in patterns to be demolished for my surface pattern. Okay, it's not going to show anything until I change my phase to only demo. Okay, and you notice that right now it's going to show those, and then some of them it's going to be bright pink. Even if I change to hidden line, it's going to be always bright pink. So if you want to say like QA/QC kind of a thing to see what is demolished, this is a good way to do it. Let's say I'm going to go to the existing. Oh, it's not going to show anything. Let's say demo phase. You notice that it's going to show more objects in there. It's going to show all the highlighted beautiful pink. Okay, so it's a good way. I mean, it's those are basically the basic setups of the phase filters and stuff like that. So there's nothing magic to it. It's just that you guys have to be careful what you put in, right? Like I tell user, like most of the time, don't mess around with this. The more you mess around, the more sometimes what happens is that people will create like number 1, number 2, but they don't check other listing. You know, it's the same as the other one. Why don't you delete what you have and just use that one? That's the one thing I usually hate is that users just create stuff without checking. There's like, okay, this is the same display filter as the other one. So try not to create too many of this because, yeah, it can get very convoluted. Now here, what I did is that previously I say do not show. So I'm just gonna basically just say face filter do not show. Okay, right now it doesn't show anything, but what happened? With the link, it's a different animal, okay? So right now, I have a link, which is this guy right here, okay? Keep in mind, the link will not show, will not respect your current face filter, unfortunately, okay? The reason why is that when I create do not show, it's only applying to the central model. So if you have the same setup in your link model, and then you put do not show, then it will start respecting it. Okay. If you start creating this filter, make sure that other model is going to have the same thing. If you don't have the same thing, then yes, it's not going to respect it. Now keep in mind, with your link model, okay, you can actually modify what face mapping goes into your drawing. So in here, you can go edit. You notice that here I just say, okay, for the reference, you can just change it to like, okay, let's say for example, for reference I want existing, demo I want demo, the new I just want to see, you know, let's say new, and then here I just want to say new, and then tenant improvement is all going to be new. So what this does is that it allows different face to show what kind of things that you want to see. Okay, just be aware. Sometimes you can say, okay, for the tenant improvement, let's say the link model, all my demo, all my new, it's all going to show existing. And then the tenant improvement, that's where I'm going to show new. Okay? And what happened is that this display, okay, let's for example here, if I want to say new, yeah, it's not going to respect it, unfortunately. What happened is that sometimes what I did is that if I change the filter and map it, it will work perfectly. It would just say do not show. Okay, I think I probably did something wrong here because this face filter doesn't have anything, so this is why. So let's say if I want to show complete, okay, now it respects it, right? You see that furniture got turned off. Previous face I didn't put anything, it just doesn't respect it because I don't have it. So here I could go face mapping. Let's try that face mapping again. So here for the new tenant improvement, you see that the maps comes back. Okay, so if let's say for example in here I just want to say show all of it new. Let's say I'm just going to change it all to new. Don't worry, I'm not going to save this. So what happened is that if you put all new, what this happens is that if you put it into the demo phase, existing phase, your object is going to show new. So this adds a little more complexity to your link model. Okay, so this is why a lot of time I don't let user set up this thing. I set it up because it can get very, very convoluted for the user for not understanding phasing. So I'm just basically showing you guys it is possible. You can make your building to show up new in all phases. Okay, regardless if they're demo or existing, it was always going to show up. Okay, just be aware because it's there. Just in case if you want to like control this, this is how I would do it. Most often, don't touch it. Okay, you can always ask me because I'm gonna basically set it up so that everybody's gonna have the same. It's gonna look the same, and they're not gonna have all this graphical issues. Okay, speaking of graphical issues, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about objects right now. So most often what happened, let's start with like a simple wall. Let's go to a wall scenario. Just put a concrete. Now, most often what happens is that user will put a door here. Okay, the door is offsetted. Oh, heritage. Okay. So what happened is that, let's assume that this is a concrete, okay? And you want this door to be removed in the new phase. So what happened is that I'm going to go here, click on existing, and say, okay, for the demo phase, it's going to get deleted. Now, when I change this to demo or new, you notice that you have a door, but it's filled in. In reality, that's not what happens. Okay? So sometimes I don't like this because you could just put in another door. Okay, that solves that issue, correct? But the problem is that it's not reality, and sometimes this thing will create this sort of an issue where you're going to have joining or conflicting issue. You will get that error message if you do this. So what is my alternative? So my alternative is that you would create a door based on what this is. Okay, what you could do is that you can put in what I typically like to do is that I like to put in this this guy right here, opening. I create a family, okay, called opening wall. What it does is that I like to put in, let's say if you know that you're going to have this building as a construction where you have to demolish the existing condition, just put an opening on it. Okay, so let's say that's my opening wall thickness. Let's say 200. Let's assume that that is supposed to be height, but right now it's at the pure deck. Let's go. Let's align this. Or yeah, let's go to, let's go 7 feet and raise it up by 2 meters. Let's assume that that's your wall. Okay, once you have this, this means that it's in a real opening. So what you're going to do next is you create another wall that you want, call it a host or something. What I like to do here is that I like to disjoin this condition. What I should do is that I should align it. Let's see if I'm able to align it. No, I'm not allowed to align it. So here I'm just going to match it to where it's supposed to be. Okay, I'm going to align it to this particular phase. Now the reason why I like to do this is because you kind of have to create a wall host so that your door can host into it. Because in reality, if you put a door in there, it's basically going to create a door host to this wall. When you do construction, what you want to do is that you want to demolish the wall and demolish the door, right? And then you want to put in a new wall and a new door. In certain conditions, sometimes your opening is going to be slightly smaller or bigger, but most of the time it's going to be, your door is going to be slightly smaller than before. So what this does is that it illustrates the phasing of how your building is going to get built. Assuming that sometimes you have an opening, it's no longer concrete, it's going to be like, let's say a horizontal metal, for instance. Oops, this is too big. Let's choose something that's like super small. Let's say 2-hour interior wall. Most often it's going to be some sort of a stud wall, right? Because sometimes the existing condition, you have to cut like a huge opening and you're just going to fill it in with, let's say, a stud wall. So this illustrates the proper how it's going to be built correctly. So once you've done that, then you can say, okay, this is my door right here. Yeah, it's gonna, unfortunately, it is what it is. Let's see if I can host it in here. Yeah, you have to be very, very, yeah, it can be very challenging if I do it in 3D. Usually I do it in plan. So let's say, assuming that that's my door, there we go. And I'm gonna adjust it to that height. I know it's a lot of step. Like a lot of people say, it's like, why do we have to do this? This is how Revit behaves. If you want the phasing to look correctly from demo to, let's say, existing, you have to construct it to absolute perfection. Because what happens is that Revit has this tendency of, okay, if you demolish it, it's either you demolish the whole wall with that thing, or you demolish the door itself and put in a new host. But you pray that there's nothing's going to happen to that object, but unfortunately Revit will tell you later on if you make changes that it cannot move the wall or it cannot move the door because you have an object in there. It will start deleting your wall, deleting your object, and it's just causing so much issue. So rather than doing this, you want to basically prevent that from happening. This is kind of like the method where it's foolproof, it's always going to work, and Revit would not complain. Okay, it's how Revit works. Unfortunately, it's just the way that it's handled. So here, I'm just going to align it here, and then you just basically align it to the wall. I'm just going to, Yeah, it's gonna give you that error message, but that's okay. You can always align it the way it's supposed to be. Any questions so far? There you go, sort of like that. And then what happens is that you can say, this particular wall, I wanted to destroy in demo, but you can also copy this, okay? And then if I want to change this to new phase, you can say here, copy, same place. There you go. It will not give you error. Okay? For this new door, you can say, I want to change this to, let's say, let's give it something else. Or actually, let's go Silate. There we go. Yeah, that's the thing about Revit family, is that if it's not built properly, it will misalign. So there you go. So that's how I do it. You put a wall, you destroy that wall, and then you copy that wall with the door and then put a new face, and then there you go. Okay, it's gonna align in the same place. Okay, some objects. Certain objects will behave, certain objects will not behave properly. One of the things you have to keep in mind, I know that a lot of people use wall as an opening. Let's say this is my wall opening. I want to, come on, where's my wall opening? Sorry, I think I have to use the plan. Sorry about that. I have to go back to my plan. Go to level 1. Change this face filter to existing. Okay, where's my wall? Okay, right here. So when you do your wall and you want to put in, let's say that's my opening. And I'm just going to change this from reference to existing. Okay, here you go. Now, one of the things about openings you have to be careful is that this opening exists based on it's gonna based on the wall. Okay, if this wall is demolished in demo, then this particular opening will follow with that. Okay, just be aware, because sometimes you want the opening to only be demoed, but unfortunately it just doesn't give you that option. So just be careful, because I know that some people will ask for this, oh, my opening, why my opening is not working properly. I think the best course of action, if you want to show opening and you want the opening to be demolished, but you want to kind of patch in or fill in some stuff, what you can use a couple ways. One way is that you can use a wall, and you can use this curtain wall. Okay, assuming that the curtain wall you have this automatically embed, then you can create your opening based on that, and change this opening to empty. Okay, change this to empty, and let's assume that this is 0, and I want this to be, let's say, 7 feet. Okay, and then what you can do now is that wall, you can tell it to basically in demo phase, it's not going to show up. Then when I change this to new phase, there we go. So that's how I adjust it. If, let's say, assuming that you want that wall to kind of like remain the same, except that I want it to be patched up, that opening, just use that. Okay, that's the second way I would do it. The other way I would recommend is I use the family. I use the family is called the this guy right here, component wall opening. So how it does is that it just basically creates that wall, 200. Okay, so right now you see it, and here you can do the same thing, say in demo. You will not see it. Okay, there's two ways. One with the family, the other one is curtain wall. Any questions so far with this? Pretty simple, straightforward. Okay, let's talk about floor. So when you do your floor, let's assume that you want to do a floor, but you want to cut away. Let's assume that this is your floor, but you want to cut away in this particular line right here, a new construction. Let's assume that you have a wall, you have to chop this off. How would you do it? The first thing I would do is that you will copy this and paste in the same location. What you do is that you adjust it to that particular location, and again you're going to do the same thing here. Here what you do is that you make it so that it's going to be demo in new construction, and the next thing you want to do is this one remains the same, and you do join geometry, so you hide that line. So let's say I'm going to go join geometry with that. So in this particular case, you notice that that wall doesn't show up. So if I go to my existing phase, let's say for example, existing, you notice that it's going to show that extension. So by demo, let's say assuming that I'm going to show demo, let's say demo plus new, well, actually I should say previous plus demo, you notice that it will show up like that. Okay, sort of kind of gist of how we do it, because I think what happened is that when you're doing an opening and stuff like that, always you want to fill in the previous one, because I think in this project in Centrum, what happens is that people just draw an outline where my cut hole is supposed to be, but they never fill in the existing phase that little guy right there, so that the new and existing, it's going to show a cutaway hole, which is incorrect. So just keep in mind, if you're doing a construction in different phase, always fill in that hole you want to cut, okay, and then use joint geometry so that it basically shows up properly in the new and use phase.
Okay. I have one question regarding the curtain wall option that you showed previously.
Yes.
If you want a portion like an opening that's in the existing to be filled in the new model,
yes,
then in plan would it show the fill material, or like the opening that was filled, or would it just show all as a new wall?
Okay, curtain wall is a little bit dicey, because what happened is that it's not like a proper just one-off objects. Curtain wall is kind of like, it's a host, right? So this one, let's say for example this panel, when you look at it, the existing and new phase is based on this right here. So in a sense, it forces you to basically demolish all of it, and then you have to fill in a new one. So that's how I would approach this, because what happens is that if you want, like, let's say for example this little hole, assuming I'm just gonna draw it in. Let's assume that you want this little guy to be, fill in a new one. Then what I typically like to do here is that in the existing phase, you have to make sure that this is empty. Okay, this is empty, and then what you do is that you would go in here and then fill in another one, saying that this is going to be filled in the new phase. Yes, okay. That's right. So you kind of have to do that, right? Okay. So that's how I would approach it with this new and existing kind of a condition. Okay. In most cases, I think they would just tear everything down, because they're not sure how that condition is gonna go in. But I know that, like, when you do windows and stuff like that, the existing curtain wall window, they want to remove it and put it in. Yeah, you kind of have to do that little bits. Okay, there's no other shortcut. Something to keep in mind. This is what I'm noticing. If you are using shaft opening, okay, shaft opening has a very interesting kind of a take on the new construction and existing phase. Let's assume that you have a hole. Okay, you see that. Let's just select that object. Sorry. You notice that it has its own phase in there. Let's assume that if you don't do, okay, let's put in a new hole in this particular phase. Let's go existing first. Oh, this isn't existing. That's good. Right now, what phase am I in? New. Okay, so let's assume that if I want to put in like a fill in that hole, okay, can I do it? So let's assume in a new phase, I'm going to change this back and forth. Okay, right now it's new phase. I want to patch this up. Okay, so let's assume that my hole is going to be here. I'm just going to put a little bit kind of over the edge, just to show you that, right now the hole is being cut. And this object, I want to put, yeah, it's a new phase. Now, if I put this and say this is going to be in demo, right now you notice that the hole is going to get patched in. Okay. Previously, if you put a shaft and you say that this shaft only exists in existing till demo, what happened is that right now there is a hole. it will not fill it in, which means that you have to go in there and fill it in. So it's a complete reversal of, let's say you put an opening inside your wall, and if you demolish it, the hole is going to get filled in. But whereas the floor, it's a complete opposite. So this is why I said you just have to be aware that this is how Revit operates. It's kind of like completely different from wall and floor. Floor shows up, that's exactly what you want. Is that if you want the shaft to be demolished, you want to set the proper place, then you want something to fill in, then it will not cut into that particular new hole in a new construction. So it's something to keep in mind, because I know that user will want to ask why certain things don't behave the way it's supposed to be. So this is why. Okay? But it's a good understanding, so that you understand that how certain things behave, so that when you do construction, it's makes it a little bit clearer. Because Revit can get very, very complicated, I would say, and then sometimes the user doesn't understand why it behaves the way it's supposed to be. Any questions so far with this? Roof, floor works the same, so I would say, yeah, just use the same method, and it would just basically filled in. Other objects, components works the same way. Okay. Now keep in mind rooms. If you, let's say you're doing a room in one phase, just keep in mind. Let's say here, I'm gonna go VV, change the room to make sure they show up everything. So if, let's say you put a room in here, and then if you want to change it to, let's say, existing, it doesn't show up. The problem with Brooms is that room will not respect phasing. It only say, okay, if it's a new phase, it's going to basically put it in. That sucks. I don't like that, right? So what happened is that if you want to have the same object showing up in both objects, you either have to put it in, let's see, this one, I'm going to go existing. So let's assume that you want the room to show up. How would you solve this issue? So the first thing I would do is you will create two of them and say, this is one, I just want a room only. And then what you do here is that you turn everything off except for the room. Okay. So right now here you have an existing. I'm just going to change this to existing. Let's assume that that is your kind of like your wall. And if you create a new drawings, let's say I want to do Lambda 17. Let's say, where's Lambda 17? This is good. So what you could do is that you basically overlapping the new and existing kind of together. So that's how I would approach it. If you want to do, like, if you do not want to retag, redo all the walls, because it's a waste of time. Sometimes client asks you to show rooms and all that stuff. I would just say don't do it. So I'll just say place it in here. Yeah, I should cut that off. And then once you place it in, all you have to do is just align it. Okay, there we go. Oh, I didn't align it properly. Oh, there we go. So there you go. So that's how you align the new and existing kind of together, is that you do the new, and then after that you basically just place the new on top of the existing. Okay? So that's a technique that I've used. Any questions so far? We've got 15 minutes, so if you guys want to ask a question, ask away. If you have any issues with the new phase, old phase kind of a thing.
Sure, we're not going to get into it on other questions.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's it can be very daunting because phasing. Now, what I like about using links, I like to treat it as kind of like a different entity, because if, let's say for example, for piers and the wing, okay, right now it's not going to show, but if I change this to, let's say, demo, right? So it basically shows you what's going on with the existing kind of a conditions. So you could do a lot of stuff. Let's say previous and demo.
I realized I was even in the model.
Yeah, I just put them in there because even though it's for information only, but it does shows you kind of like constructability, what is going to happen in there in this particular phase. Because if you don't have that information, it makes it very, very difficult to understand what is going on. Somehow this wall is missing, is it? No, it's a different material. Okay. Well, that's how you do the QA/QC kind of a thing.
I was wondering about this yesterday, working on different rooms for the interior.
Yes.
How do you see that the full listing of rooms that you have in your model?
Oh, I see. Okay. So if you want to look at rooms, the first thing I would do is that just use a schedule. Next thing you do is that you go to rooms. Okay. You notice that there is a phase. Okay. Let's say I'm gonna go new. Just say room for now. Here, what I would typically do is that you would do level. Okay. Always put in level because it just tells you the separation between what has been placed and what's not been placed. Next thing you do is just give it a name. Okay. And here for the sorting, I would say sort by level. You can put header and then do not itemize all item, or you can itemize every item just to look at it. And you notice that if it says not placed, it means that you can delete them. Okay. If it's not there, it means that someone deleted or someone purged it out of it. Okay. So that's how I do it for the thing. Now the nicest thing about the rooms is that it has phase, so you can actually choose, let's say for example existing, what did they have, and tenant improvement probably have nothing. So you can do different phase, but the problem with the rooms is that it's not phase sensitive. Unfortunately there is no such thing, so you kind of have to redo it. That's one of the wish lists I wish Autodesk would handle, so that you can give a room phase so that you can say, okay, this one is going to be existing, it's going to be demolished in a new phase, and then when you put a new room, it's going to have the new rooms versus whatever. Unfortunately, that's kind of like what it is.
So, for example, for the tenant improvement part of this project,
yes,
we have these existing rooms
yes.
in the model. They're kind of there for reference.
Yes.
And then we're creating new interior rooms.
Yes.
So, is there a way when you create a room to say, this is new, and then these ones are all existing.
Yes,
and
yes.
So that they can be sorted.
Separate. Okay. I may have to look at that more in depth, because what tends to happen is that room does not like phasing. My sort of idea to do this, it's either you make it as a link, so that you can actually say put this in this phase or that phase, so you can control it, what phase you want this room to be appearing in. If you want this room to appear in existing phase, then it will appear in existing phase, while your new rooms will not impact the old room. So I'll probably have to talk about that, look at it, how to control that, because room is one of the things that's very, very convoluted in phasing. So it's not been looked at from Autodesk point of view, but I would certainly entertain that. Maybe we could put it as a different model and then see how that reacts with, changing it to this phase versus that phase, and see how that looks. Okay.
So in your listing there,
yes,
under phase, you showed, I think, existing, and you had one list.
Yes.
And then you had another phase.
Yes.
Which
new.
showed a longer list.
Yes.
So what's the difference between them?
Oh, okay. So in this existing phase, I should go in here. The only thing that's showing up is right there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I guess that it's more for labeling purposes. But if you want to put it in as kind of like, it's for labeling purpose.
Labeling.
Yeah.
Then you can sort it.
Yes.
And have them not show if you want.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. That's why I was thinking about, with your case, is that you want those labels to show up, but at the same time, you also want those room objects to be, independent to each other, so that you know what's new, what's not new, and then you can separate the two. So I'll think about that. Maybe linking is the option to do this, but we'll see where it goes. Okay? Yeah. So any questions so far? I know that this is pretty kind of short kind of a thing. I hope that you guys learned something from this. It's not something a lot of user likes to talk about, because it's a very simple process. I know that phasing is a very simple process, but it has a lot of depth into it. If you don't understand how object behaves, it becomes very, very convoluted. I like yeah, don't touch this. That's one thing I always recommend people is that if you understand how this works, great, you can put it in. But if you don't understand how it works, what tends to happen is that people tends to replicate a lot of phase. I think one project in particular, I saw like there's like 20 different options, and some of them are just basically the same as the other one. But I don't know what it was the thinking when they do it, or what happened is that people tends to transfer project standards. Sometimes what happens is that there is, not sure if there you go, phase settings. So if let's say your one project is different from another project, and let's say the phasing, the terminology is different, what tends to happen is that people can say check all and then transfer it in. So if the naming is slightly different, then yes, you're gonna get this bunch of stuff that's being copied over without your knowledge. It's something you have to kind of watch out for. So I typically say, you know what, phasing, if you know, you understand, if it's the same, just get rid of it. The only thing you cannot get rid of is show all. That's the only thing that you cannot get rid of. But just keep in mind, do not use show all if you have existing and new phase. Okay, if you have like multiple phases, do not use show all because your material is just not going to show up properly. We have one question last time. Someone's asking, okay, I had this, where is it? Yeah, this one, beam. Okay, they don't know how to get the material to show up properly. It's because what happened is that they have it all placed under show all. Okay, if you put it under show all, this is what it's going to look like, no material. Okay, I think it was like they had one with previous and new. That was like one of the thing. There's like virtually no material. Okay, if you want your material to show up properly, I recommend just put it under show complete, because show complete is supposed to be show everything with the materiality, everything, it's completed the way it's supposed to be. Okay, just be aware, because this usually gets people. You could put show all, but I just don't recommend it. Okay, because if you do that, imagine you have an existing object that you got demolished, it's going to start popping up in your drawings and you don't know why. And sometimes what people do is that they hit delete. yeah, just be careful. Just always put show complete. Do not put show all. Okay, show all is supposed to be like a QA QC, kind of like show everything. Okay, there's also one called none. Okay, what none does is that show everything. If you set none, it will just show everything. Okay, regardless if there you go, it just show everything in like every phase into one. You notice that, okay, this stuff is from that model. Yeah, it's gonna show everything. So just be aware. It's I usually use show none as a QA QC to see if there are objects floating out in mid space. Okay, for most people you can set it to none, but in most cases it's not very useful. It's more for me to kind of analyze what is going on around it. All right, that concludes it. If there's no question, if you guys have any question or anything, just let me know. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.